Welcome to 4Palestine podcast, where we bring you the stories and voices of those standing for justice and the truth in the face of oppression. Now we are honored to feature journalist, filmmaker, and activist Abby Martin, whose documentary Gaza Fight for Freedom captures the resilience of Gaza's people during the Great March of Return protest from 2018 to 2019, despite being denied entry to Gaza. Abby collaborated with journalists on the ground to create this powerful incitement of war crimes and an inspiring story of resistance. Welcome, Abby Martin.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
And actually, we are so happy for joining us in this interview. Abby, let's start from the beginning and talk about the relation with Palestine, your relationship with Palestine, how it's began.
Well, being radicalized from American foreign policy when I was in college, Palestine was always part of that radicalization process because it's been always part of the propaganda of the war on terror.
Okay.
I remember the day of 9/11, we were shown footage of Palestinians dancing in the streets, celebrating 9/11. This propaganda footage was shown to us over and over again. Initially, the DFLP was blamed for 9/11. We had the Prime Minister at the time of Israel on our television saying, now you get to experience what our war on terror is. So it was always in the backdrop. I knew that Palestinians were conflated with terrorists, and I knew that they were attempted to be blamed for these terrorist attacks.
Okay.
Now, fast forward to 2010, the Flotilla massacre. That was, I think, a turning point for me and so many others because it was so clear cut. You know, you have Israeli commandos going on a ship in international waters and killing multiple people who were unarmed. And the propaganda was so saturated on American press, where we were shown just literal propaganda videos from the Israeli military showing why they had to kill all these people on the ship. And I just could not wrap my mind around why the American journalists were not asking questions and not pushing back on this narrative. That was a turning point for me. The next year, I worked for Russia Today, and I had my own primetime show where I worked with several Palestinian journalists. And during 2012, the Operation Pillar of Defense, one of these mowing the lawn operations from the IDF, my friends had to stop and check in with their friends and family to make sure that they were alive. And I thought, this is my calling. I will never back down from this. And I will put my heart and soul into the liberation of Palestine because I was so ashamed at the silence and complicity of my colleagues.
Okay, then in 2016, you decided to visit Palestine. So what's inspired you for this visiting?
So when I was at Russia Today doing my daily show, Breaking the Set, I would speak often about the crimes that were happening. So much so that, several videos of mine had gone viral in the Middle East as a testament to the lack of real reporting from Western journalists. I remember I had a debate with an Israeli spokesperson who said, "You're wrong about Israel. Come visit Israel, and we'll show you the truth." And so I said, "Okay, I'll see the truth for myself." So I went in 2016, and wow, it was a transformative, life-changing trip. Everything that I thought I knew was actually much worse than I had even thought.
To which cities did you win at that time?
So I spent 4 weeks traveling all across the West Bank, small villages, refugee camps. I stayed in the Balata refugee camp, Aida refugee camp. I remember going to Hebron, which was the most visceral example of Israeli apartheid I'd ever seen. And then, of course, going into the borders of 48 was just the absolute dichotomous opposite. I mean, spending several weeks with Palestinians, hearing their hearts poured open. I mean, the most beautiful, welcoming, gracious people I've ever met in my life. And no one ever said anything remotely racist. No one said anything remotely anti-Semitic. And it was just the opposite of the narrative that we've been told our whole lives. Now going into the borders of 48, the racism and bigotry was visceral. It was palpable to the point where I couldn't even bear to be there for more than a couple hours. I mean, I didn't even want to spend money there because I was so disgusted with how racist Israelis were. So again, I mean, it's the
Even you
complete
are from
opposite.
United States, you are
Yes.
not Palestinian, and you saw that.
Yes, and there's a reason why Americans are not shown what Israeli society thinks and believes on camera. We're only shown a very sanitized version of what Israeli society thinks and believes because they handpick spokespeople with American accents to speak to Americans. Israelis don't ever speak for themselves. And so, I went around Jerusalem for a few hours and interviewed Israelis, and the results were quite shocking.
Okay. Let's talk in details about the violations that committed by Israeli soldiers, and you was witness actually on these violations in West Bank.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you see?
I mean, the first day that I was there, I mean, literally within 20 minutes of leaving the airport, I remember seeing a row of people walking up a huge hill with their cars behind concrete barricades. And I said, what is going on here? And my friend Nancy Mansour said, oh, this is what they do to just inconvenience Palestinians routinely. They'll just blockade, set up makeshift checkpoints, and make them walk 3 hours outside of where their direct route is to get home. And so right out of the gate, I just said, oh my God. A couple minutes later, we saw an ambulance at a checkpoint where they were pulling out a person who was probably bleeding out. I mean, someone who needed immediate medical assistance, and they were checking the ambulance. I mean, we know what they do. We know that they deny Palestinians medical care. So that's what I saw within the first couple hours of being there. A couple hours later, we heard that a farmer was shot in the back for not turning around quickly enough when an Israeli soldier called his name. We went to the funeral the next day, and we spent time with the family. As we were leaving the funeral, Israeli soldiers had set up another makeshift barricade right outside of the house and started tear gassing and shooting rubber bullets at the funeral goers. And so I just could not believe what I was witnessing firsthand. I mean, the stories are endless of just being there a few weeks. Going through Calandia checkpoint, there was an elderly man with arms raised walking toward the security gate, and they just opened fire. Opened fire.
For
bullets
nothing?
were for nothing.
Okay.
For nothing. Bullets were flying everywhere. We were ducking in the car. And, as we know, they have complete and total impunity. They will kill anyone and retroactively justify it. And so at that point, I just realized if they killed everyone in this car, it wouldn't matter. My government would do nothing to fight for my life or accountability for my life, as well as the poor Palestinian man that they were opening fire on.
And also you have that connection with Gaza since a while, before 7th October. And you made the documentary Gaza Fight for Freedom. So let's talk about the details of this documentary and what did lead you to make this documentary?
Well, as we know, I mean, every couple of years, Israeli authorities will bomb the caged population of Gaza. They call it mowing the lawn every few years. There's always the plausible deniability that Hamas is using human shields, that Hamas is using human shields to set up, rocket launchers and all of these absurd narratives that we hear in Western media. The Great March of Return was completely different in the sense that you had peaceful Palestinians amassing in the thousands for months at a time. That it all originated from this beautiful poet Ahmed Abu Artema, who had the idea of kind of akin to Occupy Wall Street, where they wanted to set up tents to signal to the world, hey, we still are refugees. Yeah. We're still refugees between this fortified artificial border fence separating us from our ancestral lands. And that was the symbolism of the Great March of Return. And what they did in response, these cowardly snipers perched up behind sand dunes, methodically and systematically executing Palestinians who were peaceful, who had no weapons at all. It was absolutely horrific what they did over the course of several months. One day in May, they killed 62 people. 62 people in cold blood, gunned them down like dogs. Children medics, journalists in press jackets. I couldn't believe my eyes, and I couldn't believe the way that the Western media was covering it. I said, someone needs to do this story justice. Someone needs to tell the truth about what they did here. And so I spoke to my Palestinian friends in Gaza, and they said, please help us tell this story. Help us tell the world that we don't want to die. And I thought, how disgusting that you guys have to tell us. Americans have to basically be told, no, Palestinians don't want to die. They don't worship death. How disgusting the narrative that we're told in the Western media. Palestinians love life more than Americans will ever understand because they're that close to losing it. They live every moment more than Americans can ever understand. And so I wanted to show that. I wanted to show the heroism and resilience, the fact that Palestinians were risking their lives to just send a message to the world of what the truth was in Gaza. And so we worked with several colleagues in Gaza. We got the most incredible footage that I've ever seen. I mean, Maz Maza, the videographer on the film, risked his life every week, dodging bullets. He documented war crime after war crime. People who were shot in the head for doing nothing but holding a stone. These are on camera. These are all egregious violations of the Geneva Convention. And I thought maybe if just Americans knew, if they could see the truth, if they could see the war crimes on camera, surely this would change. But I think we all know what happened. It didn't matter. But, in American media, a documentary like that, that's unapologetically pro-Palestinian. It shows the Palestinian side, and it shows Palestinians how they want to be depicted. And that was what was so beautiful about it, because there's no shortage of documentaries about Palestine. There's no shortage of documentaries about Gaza, but they're all overly complicated. They all try to tell the Israeli side. They interview Israeli generals explaining why they have to kill Palestinians. They never just show Palestinians speaking for themselves. And that's what this movie did. And that's why it's such an important piece of filmmaking. And that's why ever since 2019, it's been a tool for the movement. And I've had thousands of people reach out to me saying it's changed their perspective on the situation.
By the way, there was a lot of challenges during or in order to manage the producing of this documentary. And this challenge began with the refusing to enter Gaza by the Israeli government. So how did you manage the producing of the documentary at that time?
Yes, I mean, we were in the West Bank, and I did the formal requests for Israeli authorities who tell us that they don't control Gaza, so it's interesting that they're the ones who can allow who goes in and out. But they told me I was banned for life. I would never be allowed entry into Gaza because I was a propagandist and because I was an Iranian spy. That's what they told me. I was shocked at the allegation, considering I have never had any ties with Iran. But it was quite scary to be labeled that within 48, because we know just the impunity and unaccountability for Israeli authorities to be able to do whatever they want to journalists. Not to compare my plight to Palestinian journalists, but it was quite disturbing to be labeled as such. So I had no choice. I mean, I had to do what I could to get the truth out, to work with these journalists. The blockade made it very, very difficult. We had to spend months getting these huge files transferred to us back and forth. And it was really hard.
Okay. In 2018, that the Palestinian narrative wasn't worldwide like now. So how was the impactful of this documentary at that time, especially on the American population?
So, documentaries that are unapologetically pro-Palestinian are not distributed.
Okay.
And they're not really allowed on mainstream outlets. And so we had to go underground. We tried to get it out there as best we could, but of course, every streaming network, they don't want to touch a documentary like that, even though it's a beautiful cinematic, masterfully done by these Palestinian videographers. They still wouldn't touch it. And so we went underground. We used it as a grassroots mobilizing effort. We took it on a theater tour across Canada and across America and Canada. And it was hugely widely received, sold out theaters. People were very interested and very motivated by the documentary because the documentary is a call for action. It didn't just leave people with nothing. It said, this is what we need to do. BDS is what Palestinians are calling for, and there's a call for justice on an international level to hold Israel accountable. So over the course of the last 5 years, the documentary has been shown all over the world. It's been translated in several different languages. And ever since October 7th, I have done Q&As to activist groups every single week because it's such an important film as a tool for activism because it mobilizes people to do something about the situation.
Actually, it's good to talk or to say that it's call of action, not just journalist work, not just a documentary for nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And watching
you feel
it now,
that, I mean, you feel that responsibility to motivate people to do something for Palestine.
Well, of course. I mean, coming as an activist, I wear my opinion and my advocacy on my sleeve. I don't hide what I believe and I don't hide what I want with the information that I give people. I think that this whole notion of unbiased journalism is a joke and it's a farce. In America, media is used as propaganda to manufacture consent for American foreign policy. And I will not play that game. I expose American foreign policy and I will be very open and clear about my bias. And that's a good thing. And if people like that, then that's fine. But people like to couch their opinions in these so-called experts who work for think tanks that are very vehemently anti-Arab, anti-Muslim, and pro-weapons contractor and pro-empire. And so, it really just, it's a matter of who these journalists are and who they work for. And so I'm independent. And, as an independent journalist, I advocate for marginalized communities and people who live under the boot of foreign policy and who are impacted by my government's foreign policy.
You allow a lot of Palestinian people to speak about themselves in the documentaries. I think this was somehow critical for you as a filmmaker. So tell us about that.
Yes, of course, people, criticized it. It was too biased. It was too pro-Palestinian. But again, as an activist, I don't care. I thought that it was due time to have an unabashed narrative that told the Palestinian side of the story because I'm sick. I'm sick of seeing just pro-Israel propaganda constantly. That's all I've seen my entire life. I grew up never understanding even what Gaza was. We just grow up in America thinking that Israel's the 51st state. I mean, Israel can do no wrong. It's the only democracy in the Middle East. And so to learn the truth was harrowing and infuriating. And I felt people need to know. People need to know the context of the situation. And sadly, the vast majority of American citizens just have no idea what is really going on because of this overcomplication of a very, very simple, clear-cut issue.
Mm-hmm. How was this documentary actually have a role in fighting against the Israeli and Zionist narrative in the Western media, which was calling and still calling the Palestinian resistance as terrorists?
One thing that we did in the documentary was show what the media was saying about the Great March of Return.
Okay.
And it was so egregiously false that we just show what the media says compared to the reality on the ground.
Okay.
And there's nothing else that needs to be said. I mean, it's so obviously fake, right? I mean, they were saying that Hamas was literally using children as human shields, that they were bringing children up to the border and making snipers kill kids. That's what they were telling us. They claimed that Razan al-Najjar, the heroic, world-renowned paramedic who was shot in cold blood from Israeli authorities, they said that she was a human shield. And they doctored a video of her saying, I'm a human shield, meaning I put my body on the line to save people. That's what it meant for her. That's what it meant for her. But they're shameless. They're sick. And so they'll twist and distort the truth. And no one holds them to account. Because you look at the wide swath of American media, it's not only just incessant propaganda. It's actual Israeli spies, it's former IDF soldiers, IDF spokespeople. I mean, a lot of these journalists have children fighting in the IDF. But of course, if you're Palestinian, you're too biased, right? So you'll never get a job at the New York Times. But if you're Israeli, go ahead. There's an open door policy. And I think that really puts on full display the bias.
This great march of return still affecting you, Abby? I see that in your eyes, actually.
Yes, it does, because I saw it. And it's so devastating to do this documentary and to focus on a story like Razan. And Razan impacted me because she was a feminist. She was out there leading the charge. She was trying to change society. And they killed her for it. They stopped her life from becoming the full potential of what she could have been. She could have been a revolutionary leader in society, but they wanted to kneecap her, just like they do everyone else. And it really impacted me as a woman, as a mother. Razan's story was heroic to me, and telling her story and seeing what happened on October 7th and subsequently, the lives lost, the children slaughtered, the futures robbed. Everyone deserves the accolades that Razan did. Everyone deserves their story to be told in the way that Razan's story was told. And I'm very emotional because my brothers and sisters live there. And it's so emotional to see what they've been through and to yell from the rooftops, why don't you have empathy? Why? What will it take? What will it take for you to care? How many children have to die? So it's so hard for me, and I'm so emotional about it because it's so raw. My heart is very open, and my soul is very, very raw. And every day, I talk to my friends in Gaza, and
You have a lot of friends in Gaza.
And I don't even know what to say to them because I'm so privileged, and I look at my children, and I think, you're so lucky. And it's just the luck of the draw that you were born where you were. And it's all because of just random geography that you're safe and that I can take care of you. And if you were born in Gaza, I might lose you. And the world is just so unfair. We live in such an unjust world. And I'm sorry.
It's okay. Take your time.
It's absolutely nightmarish, honestly, to see what I'm a changed person forever. I mean, I thought what I had witnessed before October 7th was bad enough. But after that, I mean, I'm a changed person. I will never be the same. I don't know how anyone can be, looking at the crimes against humanity that we've all witnessed, especially against children. These helpless, helpless children slaughtered in the tens of thousands. Humanity's dead. I don't know what I'm going to tell my children. I don't know how I can explain to them that the world has allowed this to happen. And if we don't hold Israel accountable, what's next? What's next? That's the question that I want to ask. Is this really the world that we're going to live in? Where this state can commit these crimes on camera with impunity? Proudly. That's not the world that I wish to grow children in and raise children in, and it terrifies me. So yes, I'm very impacted, and I question people who are not. I question people's soul if you are not impacted by what you see. How? How are you human? How are you human?
Abi, how did you live your life during this genocide?
Well, immediately when I heard that Hamas had invaded Israel, I knew so many people were going to die. I knew what was coming. I think we all did. And, like everyone else, I just bared witness to what was unfolding and tried to combat the propaganda as best I could. I mean, right out of the gate, the beheaded babies. I mean, I knew that was a lie. I've lived through the Iraq War. I knew the WMD lies that led us into the wanton destruction of the Middle East. anyone who's been paying attention should have seen through the absurd propaganda that they were putting out to try to dehumanize Palestinians, mass rape, trying to pretend that people were barbarians that went and just raped white women. I mean, it was just an absolutely disgusting attempt to dehumanize Palestinians and to lay the groundwork for what was coming, which was genocide. And so, like everyone that I knew that had been working on this issue, we were trying diligently to put out the truth, to combat the lies. And I did the best I could to deconstruct that, especially having done the documentary, trying to put out, this is really what Gaza is like. Please understand the context. This didn't start on October 7th. But of course, like everyone else, I mean, I couldn't just sit back and just do things online. I went immediately and went to my congressperson's office and I demanded to see him. I risked arrest several times. I sat in the lobby of my senator's office and I said, I will not leave until he speaks with me and explains why he is supporting this.
Okay.
And amazingly, he was one of the first senators, Senator Merkley, to sign on board of a ceasefire. He ended up going to Egypt and actually trying to help allow humanitarian aid in. So that was amazing. But at the beginning, I mean, I did everything that I could, joining protests every single day, going to city council, advocating, organizing, mobilizing, confronting politicians, doing everything that I could, advocating for BDS, doing interviews with Palestinians from Gaza, to try to tell their story, just trying to talk to everyone I knew, using it as an opportunity. Hey, this is what's going on. Are you ready to listen now?
Okay.
And share the documentary. I mean, just screening the documentary, trying to use the moment as an educational tool. And so I did everything
this is
that
evidence.
I could. Yes.
The documentary is evidence.
It is. Yeah, evidence of war crimes that
Yeah.
precipitated October 7th. Absolutely.
Okay.
So I have never stopped and I don't ever want to get desensitized. I don't not want to feel the pain. I want to open my heart and soul to feel that because it's the least we can do. It's the least we can do is bear witness and feel the emotions and feel the heartache and use it as fuel, use it as a catalyst for our anger and our movement for justice.
Abby, tell us about the kind of conversation that you are making with the official people in the United States, especially senators or Congress members that supporting the Zionist narrative and Israel.
Well, I haven't gotten in front of many. It's very difficult.
I think you have a lot of battles with them as a journalist.
Yes, it's very hard to get one-on-one meetings. It's, so you'll speak to their spokespeople and they'll just have kind of these emotionless faces. Well, they'll listen to you, they'll nod and say, yes, he's working on it. Yes, I will pass along your message. And so this is kind of the blanket statements that you'll hear. But one thing that was really interesting is a lot of politicians stopped going in public. They stopped doing public events because they did not want to be confronted. And it's been beautiful to see people really putting themselves out there, risking arrest, getting arrested, which I ended up getting arrested with several other members of Jewish Voices for Peace in Portland, just doing everything that we can to call attention to this. But really, conversations with members of Congress is a dead end because Congress is completely bought and paid for. We see what happens if you are critical of Israel. AIPAC can come in and buy your primary seat, which is exactly what happened with Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush in the last primary. So it's pretty devastating. That's how easy it is to buy a member of Congress. And of course, if you get into Congress, I mean, just becoming a politician in the United States, it's not based on merit or it's not really based on wanting to do the right thing. It's based on money, donors, lobbyists. And I mean, a lot of these people are megalomaniacs who are just narcissists and who just don't mind spending half of their time on the phone begging for money from lobbyists. It's a pretty disgusting job. And that's why, we don't live in a democracy, we live in an oligarchy, and it's very crystal clear. And the will of the people is completely lacking with our political representation. It's never been more clear, especially with the last election.
Mm-hmm. Abby, let's dive more on the period after 7th October and what's happening in the world in order for supporting the Palestinian narrative. Actually, on your X platform, you mentioned that the media won't tell you Gaza is warehouse of millions of ethnically cleansed Palestinian refugees that live trapped under brutal Israeli blockade. So I think this is very good sentences actually in order to explain to the people what's going on in Gaza.
Right from the beginning, I knew, people don't have this context. I mean,
Yeah.
I've heard tons of people just say, first of all, why can't they just leave? Oh, they think Gaza's another country. I mean, that's how misinformed we are. And so I thought the least I could do is cut this clip from our documentary that explains the short history from the Nakba till today. I mean, even before the Nakba,
Yeah.
when Palestinians living in Ster Road were taking in Jewish refugees, from militias. So it's amazing when you look back at the history, and then of course the Nakba. I mean, the forced expulsion of 750,000 refugees that do have the right to return still under international law. And subsequently, I mean, until today, I mean, the shoot to kill policy, that's something else that people think, after Hamas came to power, that Israel, they need to kill these people because they pose a threat to Israel if they stray too close to this artificial border fence. No, that was in place from day one in documents that are declassified. Shooting to kill, they also laid mines in the routes of refugees so they would not return to their homes. I mean, that's how evil and barbaric Zionism is from day one. So to give that context is so crucial to people. I mean, what is Gaza? It's a warehouse. It's a warehouse of ethnically cleansed refugees who cannot go back to their own homes just mere miles away. I mean, it's amazing, right? And when you know the brutal siege that they're under, I mean, no clean water. I remember the UN saying in 2020 it would be uninhabitable due to a lack of clean water alone. The majority of illnesses in the Gaza Strip before October 7th were because of a lack of potable water. People can't live like that. You can't live without electricity. You can't store meat. I mean, that is barbaric. And for people to not understand these basic things, it's just outrageous. It's outrageous that our government is subsidizing this criminal apartheid state committing genocide. And it's up to us to learn the most basic facts. I mean, ignorance is no longer an option.
Is no longer an option. This is good.
It really is not. Especially knowing what we know about what our government is doing to support this. You have to educate yourself. It's the least you can do.
Okay. We all know in United States there's a problem actually in supporting the resistance movement or resistance people in Gaza. So how do you deal with that?
Right. I mean, there's the compulsion to condemn Hamas, right? And every single article, every single official, every single journalist has to begin any critique of Israel by first condemning Hamas.
Do you condemn Hamas?
Absolutely not. And the problem with this is that, first of all, you're seeding the argument. You're immediately giving them a justification. You're immediately putting Hamas on an equal playing field to the Zionist state that's committing atrocious crimes against humanity against a besieged population. So that's first and foremost a huge problem. As we know, these aren't two sides. They're not two equal sides. There's an oppressed people and there's an oppressor, right? And there's a colonizer and colonized people. And so it's a rhetorical trap. And it's also just absurd to condemn a faction of people who are the only thing standing in the way of mass graves for Palestinians. It's disgusting that anyone would dare to condemn the resistance, especially at this point.
Do you think that 7th October became a turning point in the American public's understanding of the Israeli occupation?
I mean, unfortunately,
Even the supporting of Israel by
yes.
the government.
I mean, I
for
think
sure.
I think Israel couldn't help themselves but go full genocidal, right? Because that's what Zionism is. I mean, it's a genocidal mentality. It's based on the expulsion of indigenous people and the continuous expulsion and extermination of indigenous people. And so October 7th was the perfect pretense. They've been clamoring for a pretense like this for a long time. And so they used it to the full capacity and they went balls to the wall. They went 150%. They extended all of their political capital that they'll ever have. And because of that, because of their over-the-top genocidal response to October 7th, it immediately shifted the narrative over to people just realizing, oh my God, what is going on? I mean, I think if they didn't commit genocide, I think they would have a lot more sympathy from the world, and I think people would still be very confused and not maybe interested to learn more. But because they went full genocidal and started committing genocide, people were blown away, I think. And for the first time, we saw this kind of shift in consciousness. I mean, this has been happening slowly. Back in 2020, I think there was a poll that said 25% of American Jews thought that Israel was an apartheid state. And so this consciousness has been swelling. But October 7th and subsequently the genocide in Gaza, I think completely took it to a new level where the majority of young people know exactly what's going on. They sympathize with Palestine more than Israel. This is groundbreaking. This is monumental. And this signifies a historic shift that will never go back. Because coupled with this shift in consciousness from American youth, you have human rights organizations that are revered by liberals, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, even B'Tselem, of course, Israeli human rights organizations, declaring Israel to be an apartheid state and subsequently declaring Israel to be committing genocide. And you can't go back to what it was before. You can't go back to the narrative that Israel's a democracy now. Now, liberals have to accept that Israel is not what they thought. And that if you accept that Israel is an apartheid state, which is a crime against humanity, an apartheid state committing genocide, well, certainly something needs to be done about that to end apartheid and to end genocide. And so now the narrative has to be, what needs to be done to stop these crimes against humanity? And that signifies something that we can never go back to the pre-narrative that used to exist. And so that's why I am optimistic, despite the horrific things that we've witnessed over the last 14 months, there's something changing that will inevitably lead to the fall of Zionism. And I am convinced of that. Because apartheid can't stand. We can't justify apartheid.
Yeah.
And we can't justify genocide. And those crimes need to be held accountable and they need to be stopped. And Israel Israel has put itself on the defense for its whole existence. I mean, that's why it's survived and thrived, because it's inverted reality. It's flipped reality on its head, and it's invested tens of billions of dollars into controlling the narrative in the West. But we see Palestinians dictating their own reality for the first time with social media. And those lies don't hold anymore because we see the truth. Just unfettered truth. You just open your phones and you see with your own eyes. We don't need to have the New York Times tell us what Israeli generals say about Hamas. None of that matters anymore.
But by the way, now there's some changes in the narrative of some journals, global journals like New York Times, Washington Post, something like that. There's some changes.
Well, they have no choice but to change a little bit because they see the tide turning. I mean, they know that they're going to be rendered completely obsolete if they don't tell some truths. But unfortunately, New York Times is one of the worst perpetrators of Israeli propaganda. I mean, all throughout the last 14 months, it has been absolutely horrific. The passive voice, you never know who's doing the killing, who's directing the policy. Every time they talk about Israelis, they're massacred. I mean, they have these emotive descriptors about Israeli deaths. And it's very clear-cut which lives are valued more. And you look at who works for the New York Times. I mean, a lot of people who are affiliated with Israel. I mean, a lot of people who have kids in the IDF. There was an Israeli spy who was literally a writer for the New York Times. The person who they picked as the journalist to adjudicate the mass rape allegation was just some random person who was liking all of these tweets calling to turn Gaza into a slaughterhouse. Yet they fired an award-winning journalist for simply signing onto a letter saying, "Stop the genocide." So you see the double standards play out very clear as day. New York Times is horrible. I don't think they'll ever change because that's what they serve. They serve the elites and they serve the interests of the ruling class in the United States. And so you're never going to get the pro-Palestinian narrative breaking through on mainstream outlets like that. And that's why there's been this burgeoning renaissance of independent media and alternative media. And that's why young people simply are tuning these outlets out.
Abi, there's a lot of people in the United States still refusing to see what's really going on in Gaza. In speaking about that, we have to mention your interview with Piers Morgan, and especially because you refused to condemn Palestinian resistance despite the pressure that placed on you during the interview. So, how was the impactful of this interview?
On Piers Morgan, I knew what I was getting into, but I didn't know how long he would spend belaboring the point.
Okay.
But of course, I stood my ground, and I still will, and I'll explain why. I mean, when you condemn Hamas, you're immediately ceding ground to the narrative that the Zionists want you to, and you're immediately saying there's rationale for Israel to do what they did, right? So immediately you're saying, oh, Hamas did this, so of course Israel has the right to do this and that. And so that's the problem. I mean, you're giving them the justification. And it's a rhetorical trap for many reasons because it's a false equivalency. There's no equivalency whatsoever between Hamas and the Israeli state. And so that's a huge problem because they want to put that on an equal playing field. Aside from that, to condemn the resistance that's fighting a genocidal onslaught is absurd. At this point, to condemn any faction of Palestinian resistance when they're the only ones standing in between the mass graves of Palestinians and the genocidal occupying forces is outrageous. And I will never, ever condemn Hamas. Ever.
Okay. By the way, you have had several impactful interviews since October 7th, including with figures like Roger Waters, Francesca Albanese, Tyler Lawrence, and Alana Hadid. So, how have these conversations shaped your understanding of media bias and the global response to the situation in Gaza?
Well, it's been twofold. On one hand, there's been this incredible kind of community built with people all over the world who maybe felt isolated about this issue before, that now they felt like they can finally come out of their shells and be outspoken advocates for the Palestinian cause. And because there was this dire urgency that we can't wait in the wings anymore, we have to speak the truth with every fiber of our being, and we have to advocate for the liberation and justice and freedom of Palestinians. And so it's kind of been beautiful to witness this community building, this international movement burgeoning of millions of people around the world standing in solidarity with Palestinians. On the other hand, there's been this complete failure of silence and complicity with celebrities, journalists, a lack of solidarity with the journalists who are being hunted systematically in Gaza. I'm absolutely appalled at the silence from international media organizations and institutions. Where are the walkouts? Where are the letters? Where are the statements decrying the systematic slaughter of your colleagues? And the only thing I can think of is that they don't consider Palestinians as journalists. They don't consider their lives as worthwhile as theirs. And it's absolutely horrific. It's horrific, the dehumanization of Palestinians, to the point where you don't have medical institutions speaking out about the onslaught of every single hospital being bombed. Where are they? Where are they? Instead, you see universities cracking down on pro-Palestine demonstrators instead of speaking out against the scholasticide that we've seen. the utter decimation of every piece of infrastructure across the Gaza Strip. So that silence from Hollywood, from musicians, at this point, I don't have respect for anyone. If you haven't spoken out against what we're seeing, I do not have respect for you. And sadly, I can count the amount of people on both hands who are famous, who have put themselves out there. I don't care about the risks at this point. If you're not going to take risks, what is the point? What is the point of your platform?
Okay.
So yeah, it's been pretty disappointing, to say the least.
What kind of risks and threats that you faced from the Zionist lobby in United States? We all know the powerful of Zionist lobby in US.
Well, of course, there's the smears. I mean, ever since I started speaking out against Palestine, I've had my Wikipedia page doctored to paint me as an anti-Semite. I went on Joe Rogan's show several times to talk about this issue, and he said he has never received more letters from any other guest being on than from when I was on. But as we know, it's not organic. These aren't just organic people writing letters to Joe Rogan. No, it's a coordinated campaign from the Zionist lobby. And that's what they do. They'll send out tens of thousands of letters to institutions, to college campuses, to corporations, to scare people of authority, to silence their employees, their students. And, in the case of Joe Rogan, he was independent enough to not have it impact him. But he was very taken aback by the power and coordination of the campaign to silence me. So it's been a lot of propaganda and smears, and that's how they tend to do it in the US. They try to discredit the journalists who defy the narrative.
Okay. And by the way, you have some legal issues because you are supporting the BDS movement. And I think you have some problems, especially with the state of Georgia. So tell us about this story.
Yeah, many people might be amazed to learn that in over half of the states, I think it's actually 70% of US states have anti-BDS legislation on the books. So legislation that is against the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement. So Israeli lobbyists have been preemptively going to state legislatures all across the country to try to pass these laws under the guise of anti-Semitism. But really what these laws do is stymie our First Amendment right. The right that we herald as the most fundamental right of our democracy, the right that we cherish, that we write about in movies and books and what makes our country so great. Well, Israeli authorities have actually undermined that right by taking away our right to boycott. The right to boycott is enshrined in the First Amendment. This goes back to the Montgomery bus boycotts of the civil rights. This is our fundamental sacred right. And so I was scheduled to give a speech at Georgia Southern University about media literacy, and I was given a contract in order to receive state funds that said I have to pledge that I will never support the BDS movement. And I said, okay, I'm not going to sign this contract. This is outrageous. And so the conference fell apart, and I was denied my speaking role. And so I sued the state of Georgia over their anti-BDS law. And I initially won, as other plaintiffs have across the country. Now, amazingly, even though we hear constantly about Russia and Putin undermining our democracy and meddling in our affairs in the United States, amazingly, we never hear about Israel doing it. But what happened is a really interesting case study of Israeli influence in our US political system, because after I won my court case, an Israeli consulate official came to the Georgia State Legislature, the Georgia State House, and they advocated to change the law so my case would be rendered moot. So they changed the law so that you had to make $100,000 in the state of Georgia in order to sign the anti-BDS clause. So technically the law is still on the books, even though you can't put a price tag on free speech. So I won in principle. right? So if someone goes to Georgia with a $100,000 contract, they can sue and they would still win. But because Israel came and interfered with the outcome of the case, the law is still technically on the books because they just upped the amount from 1,000 to 100,000. So it's a very insidious, cynical ploy, and it's a way to declare victory for Israel, even though they lost.
Okay. And you're still supporting the BDS movement and the boycott movement.
100%.
How do you see the impactful and influence of the boycotts in order to dismantle the Zionist lobby?
Well, I look at apartheid South Africa, and I see that is what made apartheid fall. And it's not just the political and economic boycott, it's the consumer boycott, it's the cultural boycott, which I think is actually the most impactful and rapid thing that we can do, is isolate Israel culturally, because of course they are really integrated in the global economy, and that's going to be really hard to uncouple. They have done a very good job with spy systems, with defense technology, and they're very integrated economically. So culturally, it's up to us to advocate for people to never go there.
Okay.
Israel can no longer be seen as cool or hip. It can no longer be seen as gay-friendly. We need to expose Israel as a genocidal, monstrous state. And if people go there, we have to shame them. And so the academic boycott, celebrities, we need to just constantly hound them and never let them hear the end of it if they go and play in Israel. And that, I think, is going to be the most impactful thing that we can do. But at the end of the day, if BDS weren't the solution, why has Israel invested so much into undermining the BDS movement? Why are they so threatened by BDS? Because they know that the tide of justice is inevitable, and they know that BDS is what will bring accountability and the fall of apartheid. And that is why they have preemptively passed all of these laws across the states, because they want to make it as difficult as possible.
Okay.
But divestment, 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 and it's happening. It's happening across the country, and it's starting at college campuses. It's happening at city council, and it's beautiful because it's just a matter of time.
It's a matter of time. You imagine that day that the world will be without Israel?
I imagine a world without Zionism.
Okay.
And so at this point, I fear that Israeli society is far too fascist to be able to have a two-state solution. I mean, we already know the Likud Charter declared from the river to the sea. They wanted it all. They have worked against a second state, a Palestinian state. It's been a pipe dream for the last 20 years. The Oslo Accords were a farce. And unfortunately, you still have this kind of placation from Western politicians to Westerners about a two-state solution. We know that it's fake. Anyone can look at the West Bank and see how atomized it is with settlements. They have allowed illegal settlements to build in the West Bank for 20 years since the Oslo Accords. And what reality can that be a Palestinian state? It's absurd. So, as we know, even Hamas has said, as a matter of national consensus, they would respect a Palestinian state among 1967 borders, but we know that that's never going to happen. And so I think the only option moving forward is a one-state solution. One state, one democratic state with equal rights for all. Because right now, what we have is millions of Palestinians living under a fascist military dictatorship. And that is unacceptable. So whatever happens with the ceasefire, we cannot lose sight on the full liberation of Palestine and integration into a democratic state.
Okay. By the way, we have to mention that this interview after 2 days of signing the agreement of ceasefire. So as an American journalist, how do you see the agreement now, especially during the period of Trump? What is your perspective of what's going to happen after that?
Well, it's difficult to look at what Gaza is now.
Yeah.
A metropolis turned into rubble. So I want to celebrate with Palestinians. I mean, I don't want to take away from obviously the excitement to have a cessation in the massacres. Obviously, we should all take peace in the fact that the killing will subside, right? I mean, that's something that I don't want to take away from, but I think we have to be realistic about what is going to come from this. And it's really hard to be optimistic when they've destroyed everything in Gaza. They've killed hundreds of thousands of people. They've destroyed all of the homes. They've committed ecocide. How can anyone live there? How can anyone return to their homes? There's no homes to return to. Yeah. And knowing that this is the same deal, almost word for what was back in May, and that Biden, who is a monster, let massacre after massacre for 8 more months when he could have just ended this with one phone call, it's just horrific. So of course I'm happy, I'm elated. I mean, when I see the children cheering and crying, and I talk to my friends who are just so excited for the possibility for peace, even for a moment, that they can go retrieve their brothers' corpses from under the rubble, that they can go bury their family. They could have a chance to grieve without worrying about surviving for the next 5 hours. I mean, of course, that's amazing. But we have to know that Israel they're not going to adhere to the ceasefire. They're not going to rebuild Gaza for the Palestinians. They have done this for one goal, to ethnically cleanse Palestine. They want to take it all. We know about the Greater Israel Project. That's why they just invaded Lebanon and Syria. Yeah. They want it all. They're not going to let Palestinians take back Gaza. So I think we have to look at, the utter moral corrupt failure and bankruptcy of someone like President Biden, who will go down as one of the most horrific war criminals in modern history, a war criminal of the highest magnitude who belongs in a dungeon for what he has done to Gaza. And Trump, obviously, used his leverage. He used his leverage and he told Netanyahu it needs to stop. But we have to look at the deal that he made with Netanyahu about what Netanyahu will get in return for making this ceasefire happen. And that's very scary too, because he's rapidly green-lighted annexing the West Bank, lifting sanctions on extremist settlers, Pegasus software, as well as told Netanyahu that they can go back in after phase 1 of 42 days. So what does that mean? It means the war is not over. It means that they will probably go back in and do whatever they want once Hamas has no leverage. And they never cared about the hostages anyway. They've been bombing them this whole time. Yeah. So I'm very scared about what's to come. I'm very fearful about what they will do under Trump. But of course, I'm elated at this moment in time that at least the killing will stop for a moment.
But also as an American journalist that's seeing all of the changes that's happening in the world, could you give some hopeful for the people of Gaza? I think they need to hear that from you.
I think that people in Gaza need to know that it's the beginning of the end of the Zionist state.
Okay.
The Zionist state will not survive. To stay in the same place, they have to kill and kill and kill. That's the only thing they know how to do. And that's not a surviving strategy. Mm-hmm. And that's not a winning PR strategy for the world. And the more people who wake up, and certainly tens of millions of more people have woken up to the truth, to the barbaric nature of what Zionism is and what Israel really represents, there's no going back for them. So for decades, pro-Palestine advocates have been on the defense to explain why defense of Palestine, why advocacy for Palestinian liberation is not anti-Semitic, why criticizing Israel is not anti-Semitic. That is no longer the case. Zionists are on the defense now, explaining why they support apartheid and genocide. They're no longer going to be allowed in the same spaces as progressives. The whole idea of progressive except for Palestine is no longer real. You are no longer going to be seen as progressive or liberal if you are Zionist. It is a racist, colonial, genocidal ideology, and it has been exposed. And at this point, anyone with a shred of humanity is on the side of Palestinians. And that's the hope we have to hang our hats on. That's the hope that we have to keep striving for. And that's what gives me optimism, because I see the truth. I see the world waking up. I see the mass movements in the streets. And even with the Iraq War, I mean, I saw millions of people protesting that, right? And that was the last time I saw people protesting American foreign policy in my country. But even that was different, because that was American soldiers. That was the American government directly invading Iraq. This is different. This is an awakening that extends beyond just our country. This is international. This is something that's awakened people into realizing that Palestinians are our brothers and sisters. The humanity has sparked something. That empathy has sparked something, and that will not die. And we are going to keep fighting. And no matter what happens with the ceasefire, I think people will never go back. There's no going back.
Yes.
There's only moving forward with the path to justice.
Abby Martin, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.